G'day Internet, the time has come for another build rundown, this time on our second Signature Series Adventure Sportster. This thing is based on a 1200 Sportster and it is a dual sport custom, but that's about where the similarities end with my personal wide of the mark Adventure Sportster. We've done a lot to this thing to get it where it is, so stick with me and I'll run you through absolutely everything. Let's start with one of the more obvious modifications on the Sporty. This thing's running a KTM 1190 Adventure front end. I ran a Triumph Tiger set of forks on my bike. This time around we went for the KTM forks simply because the performance is far better and then the aftermarket capabilities of them are a lot better as well. So we've run a 19-inch front wheel, a little bit thinner tyre this time around, still got the dual brake setup for that really good performance on the street. And the suspension has been dialed in by none other than Charlie Costanzo. He's a bit of a guru around town, all the off-road boys use him. So I took the front end to him, he's dialed it in for the weight and the riding style. We've got a bit of custom aluminium work on the front end. So we've got the fork shrouds that are handmade, the custom fabricated front fender, and then of course the light housing, which is all custom fab as well. Low beam with the two spotties down the bottom and then the big dog up top for your high beam. Moving on, we've got a set of 3.5-inch risers on this Sportster, housing a set of Pro Taper Outlaw bars. We've got a tiny little Moto Gadget Speedo in there, running the purpose-built Moto buttons, ISR levers, Vans grips, and then our newly released Scrambler mirrors as well. These things mount up on the top or bottom of your clutch and front brake perch using the pivot bolt. Really handy little setup if you want that minimal mirror look. We've also mounted a 2018 Harley Davidson Street Bob tank on this thing. The bike itself is a carburetor setup. The tank was an EFI, so we had to modify that, put a petcock in, got a nice little flush mount cap here. The mounting of this thing was quite easy, but to get the turning that we wanted, we actually had to scallop out the front of the tank. These late model forks run not very much offset, so you often seem to bash your tank. So we've scalloped those out so you can get a really good turning circle on the front end as well. So the 98 Sportster that we started with didn't have a left-hand side cover. So what we've done is modified a later model Sportster cover here, put a pivot hinge and house your electronics and left space for a little toolkit in here as well. These are released with a quarter turn quick lock mechanism that slots up in there and locks the toolbox away. Another really trick little bit that I did with this came from my experience riding my Sportster for wide of the mark. On the long days, you copped a lot of vibration through that seat. So the seat setup on this thing is built off a small frame that we fabricated that's actually completely insulated. So the whole thing is rubber mounted to hopefully dampen a bit of that vibration, which brings us nicely to the tail end. This is probably my favorite bit of fab work on this bike. When we got commissioned to do this second Sportster project, I sort of didn't want to make it too similar to the one that I've built. I never try to build the same thing twice. So what I tried to talk the customer into, and I'm really glad he let me run with, was this sort of motocross setup tail. It's nice and sharp. I think, you know, the contrast between the big bold shapes on the front end and this thin sharp tail works quite well. And it just gives you the impression that this thing means fucking business. So I'll give you guys a little peek under the seat here. We've housed our newly released V3 black box. This tiny little unit runs all the lighting and control on the bike. So that's tucked away nice and safely under here, with the rest of the electrics hidden underneath the left-hand side cover inside the toolbox. So you've got your fuse panel, your digitally tunable ignition that can be sort of done on the fly underneath this cover as well. So the tail is mounted onto the stock subframe here. It's made out of 2.5mm aluminium sheet with a French-tin LED brake light, and then we're running our 3-in-1 turn signals down on the side here as well. Onto the running gear, we've used the absolute top tier, just like everything else on this bike. Olin's shocks set up by Charlie Costanzo as well. We've got a Track Dynamics aluminium swing arm, a bit of weight saving there, but it's been fitted with a set of aftermarket KTM Adventure hubs. So the good thing about these is they're a really common adventure bike, easy to find parts for, and they actually fit quite well with the standard Harley sizing setup. So we figured out a way to modify the front hub, and then obviously running the front suspension off the KTM, the hubs fit right in there, which made life a little bit easier. Obviously we've gone with the chain conversion because this thing is going to be doing a bit of off-roading. Belt drives just are no good when it comes to copping debris. They'll tend to break pretty easily. With the setup that we've gone, we always have to move these pegs. There's nothing really available in terms of peg mounts, so we've gone with the similar style peg mount to what I did with my Sportster on the clutch side, and then on the chain drive side here, you've got to step that out, so we've been able to run our exhaust through, mount our rear brake master cylinder, and then had room enough for this little onboard air compressor here as well. So you can take that thing out, flick a switch, you can drop your pressure in your tyres, pump them back up when you get onto the road. Sort of makes life pretty easy. Came in very handy when I was out on the road for White of the Mark II. I say it's sort of handy, but using this thing is just a total flex. So the bike we started with was a 1998 Sportster 1200S, which is a twin spark setup. These were sort of ticketed as a street version of a Sportster. So we've managed to make a pretty nice looking dual coil setup. The red leads here, everything ties in super nice. I was really happy with that setup. And then walking around to the carburetor side, we ran again with Electron setup. I was pretty impressed with the performance of mine, but we did do a few upgrades to the intake. So obviously this airbox was designed specifically for this motorcycle. I'm going to replicate it on mine because the setup works a lot better. It's just a little bit more free flowing, and it still gives you that nice bit of protection being tucked in behind the headlight plate there. This was custom designed. We sort of like took measurement on the DNA filter and then designed this to fit over and seal on the end of the air filter. It's capped off on the other side, held in by a stainless steel cage here, and then by the magic of 3D modeling, we were able to take that shape, bring it into a nice round cylinder that links up through a silicone hose onto the stainless steel here. There's plenty of challenges on this build. It's not easy taking a street style Sportster and developing a dual sport motorcycle that actually works, but I'm pretty confident this thing is going to do the job really well. With the exhaust on this one, the high-sided exhaust that we built last time looked really good, but again, I wasn't too happy with the performance on it. So this one, we've designed it to be a lot more free-flowing. I went with a 2-into-1 system again, just because I really like the sound and you do get better power out of them. I wanted to sort of create a Dakar style thing with a nice long high exhaust. One thing that we had to work around though was a set of pillion pegs. So when we were building this bike, the owner wanted to make sure he could chuck his kit on the back, so we had to create a clip-on rear seat for this, and then also factor in a set of pillion pegs as well. Having freshly finished my Sportster and getting commissioned to do this thing, I was so hyped to get started. I had a lot of ideas that I didn't get to test out on my first one because he had that Wide of the Mark time constraint, but this thing is built to absolute perfection in terms of what I could build out of an off-road Sportster. Everything's super high spec. I really like the way that it's come out and the way that it's styled. I enlisted a bit of help from my mate Josh at Ride Design Co. So as per usual, Pop Bang Classics has laid down the paint. He's put down the little purpose-built Moto signature on the tank, just let you know that this is the Signature Series Sportster, and this is painted on as well. The rest of the colorway that you see is an actual custom graphics kit. So Josh came down, hand templated a lot of the stuff on the fork guards, headlight shroud, side covers and tail, and then we've custom printed a graphics kit. So at the click of a button and a few swaps on color, you could change the whole look of this bike with a sticker kit, just like you could a motocross bike. In the last couple of years, building wild projects like this has really defined what purpose-built moto is and can do. There's nothing that makes me more grateful than having a client come in the door, task us with building something this crazy and completely trust us that we can get the job done. I'm gonna get out now on a quick test ride. I'll start it up, let you hear how it runs through that exhaust that we've built. I'm not gonna take it off-road though, mostly just because I don't want to clean the thing afterwards, but you'll get a pretty good idea of how this thing runs. this is the part where your favourite YouTuber is going to ask you to subscribe to their Patreon. Luckily for you, we're not YouTubers. We're bike builders and parts makers. So if you like the content we create and the bikes we build, or you hate both of those things and just want to grab some gear for your next project, make sure you show your support, jump on our online store and give your bike that purpose-built Moto touch. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.